In 1992, Congress banned sports betting in 46 states. A 2018 court ruling turned everything on its head, and by 2024, it had become a $13.7 billion industry in a single year. By the end of this video, you'll know who built this machine, the celebrity operation that preyed on the young, and why addiction was always part of the business model. The machine. When the Supreme Court struck down the federal ban on sports betting in May 2018, there were already 18 states with legislation drafted and waiting. What followed was the fastest commercial expansion in American sports history. If you don't understand how that machine makes money, you won't understand what it cost. When you place a standard NFL point spread bet, you stake $110 to win $100. The house pays the winner $100 and keeps $10. It doesn't matter which team covers. The sportsbook takes its cut regardless. Sportsbooks call this the VIG, and it is baked into every line. The aggregate of those cuts is called the hold rate. In 2024, U.S. sportsbooks held 9.7 cents on every dollar wagered. Sounds like nothing, but across $149 billion in bets, that produced $13.7 billion in a single year, more than the entire global box office in 2023. Put it this way, if you placed a $110 bet every single day of 2024 and won half of them, you would still end the year behind. Not because you were unlucky, because the price of every bet was set so that luck was never really the point. What makes that number darker is the direction it has moved. In the first full year after legalization, the hold rate sat at 7.1%. By 2024, it was 9.7%. As sportsbooks consolidated and same-game parlays replaced single bets as the dominant product, the cut got larger. The game stayed the same. The house just kept more of it. Most people never noticed the odds had shifted against them because the app didn't announce it. It just offered a bigger payout and hid the price in the maths. That is the machine, not entertainment. A mathematically guaranteed transfer of wealth that most people stepped into without realizing the floor had already been tilted. How it got built so fast starts not in 2018, but 26 years earlier when Congress decided to lock it away. The ban. In 1992, Pete Rose had just been banned from baseball for betting on his own team. The Black Sox scandal was still in the cultural memory. Congress was told that legalized sports betting would corrupt American sport from the inside. If you cared about the games, the argument went, you had to shut the door completely. The Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, PASPA, passed 88 votes to 5. The commissioners of the NFL, NBA, and MLB had testified in its favor. It didn't work. Betting moved offshore, to Costa Rica, Antigua, Belize, and into the hands of local bookmakers operating without oversight or accountability. In 2014, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver wrote in the New York Times that an estimated $400 billion a year was being wagered illegally on American sports. That is not a typo. The ban hadn't stopped betting. It had handed the market to people who answered to nobody. The integrity argument also had a time limit. The same leagues that had championed the ban spent the years after 2018 signing official partnership deals with DraftKings and FanDuel. The organizations that had testified before Congress about protecting the sanctity of sport became their most valuable marketing partners within months of the ruling. The integrity of the game, it turned out, had a price, and the leagues knew exactly what it was. What brought the ban down, and who had been preparing for that moment long before the ruling came, is where this story gets interesting. The door. On May 14, 2018, the Supreme Court ruled that PASPA was unconstitutional. The ruling came down to a simple principle. Congress cannot force a state to maintain a law it no longer wants. That sounds straightforward, but here's what most people miss. The court didn't legalize sports betting. It simply removed the federal block that had prevented states from doing so themselves. Congress could have stepped in and passed new legislation to replace PASPA. It chose not to, and that absence of a decision changed everything. What followed looked like a spontaneous explosion. Within weeks, the first legal bets outside Nevada were being placed in Delaware and New Jersey. Within a year, 6 states had live markets. And in this business, getting from legislation to accepting a single bet typically takes between 6 months and 2 years. It was only possible because the preparation had started long before the ruling arrived. When the decision landed, 18 states already had legislation drafted and waiting. DraftKings and FanDuel had market entry strategies mapped to individual states. In New Jersey, DraftKings had staff physically present at the state's Division of Gaming Enforcement offices the morning after the ruling, paperwork already prepared, ready to file for a license before most Americans had finished reading the headline. The door had opened. They had been standing outside it for years, blueprints in hand. Who paid for that preparation, how much it cost, and what they got in return is what nobody reported at the time. The buyout. The preparation that put 18 states ready before the ruling didn't come cheap, and what happened after the door opened cost considerably more. If you've ever wondered why sports betting feels inescapable, why it's on every screen and in every ad break, this is where that story starts. Since 2018, DraftKings and FanDuel have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on political influence across the country because the politicians writing the laws are the most important customers they have. The scale of that spending became impossible to ignore in 2026. DraftKings, FanDuel, and Fanatics quietly pooled $43 million into a super PAC called Win for America and directed it at state legislative races across the country. It went to Republican committees and Democratic committees alike. To them, the political divide is just a technicality. What matters is access. In Massachusetts, lawmakers were debating the Better Health Act, a bill designed to protect people showing signs of addiction from the most aggressive betting products on the market, with mandatory limits and restrictions on the bet types most associated with problem gambling, the kind of basic safeguards that treat a gambling problem as a public health issue rather than a revenue stream. DraftKings executives donated directly to the Speaker of the House and the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, the two people with the power to kill it before it reached a floor vote. The bill never made it. The people it was designed to protect never got the chance to find out. They even have a name for all of this spending: customer acquisition costs, which tells you everything you need to know about who they think the customer is. It isn't you. A business that fights this hard to control its own regulation tends to have something specific it's protecting. The numbers reveal exactly what that is. The odds. Here is the question these companies have never wanted answered in public. If sports betting is just entertainment, something millions of Americans do casually for the fun of it, then who exactly is paying for a $13.7 billion industry? So, if you want to understand who the real customer is and what they knew about them, stay with it. The answer came from a study commissioned by the state of Connecticut in 2024. Researchers found that more than half of all sports betting revenue came from the highest severity of problem gamblers, people already showing clinical signs of addiction who were generating the majority of the income. A separate study of 9 million gamblers across the 2023 to 24 NFL season found that 60% of bettors accounted for just 1% of sportsbook revenue. The product most associated with that pattern is the same-game parlay. Attractive odds, a significantly higher house edge, and the betting format most frequently cited in problem gambling cases. It is also the fastest-growing product on the market. Calls to gambling addiction hotlines have risen sharply in almost every state with a legal sports betting market. Florida alone reported a 138% increase in calls to its addiction helpline in a single month. One caller told a Florida helpline counselor she had remortgaged her house to cover losses on same-game parlays. She hadn't told her husband. She had been betting for 11 months. For years, the federal response was effectively nothing. No dedicated research funding, no public health infrastructure, just state programs trying to keep up with a national industry. When federal funding finally appeared in 2026, it was limited to military and veteran populations. The same companies that spent $43 million on political access in a single cycle have never once lobbied for more addiction research funding. The oversight is not accidental. The machine had its business model. What it needed next were the faces that would make it look like fun, and it was willing to pay whatever it took to get them. The enablers. A business built on addiction needed one more thing: to look normal. And for that, it needed faces that young people trusted. In 2022, Stake, an online casino, announced a partnership with Drake, making him the first global artist to endorse an online casino in a deal worth an estimated $100 million a year. What followed was a series of live streams in which Drake placed enormous bets in real time, watched by millions of fans, including teenagers old enough to follow Drake, but not old enough to walk into a casino. He lost $8 million in a single month at one point, and kept going. What his audience didn't know was that some of those wagers were covered by Stake as part of the deal. The losses were theater, and the normalization was always the point. When Twitch banned stakes advertising for consumer protection concerns, stakes founders responded by building their own streaming platform. They called it Kick, offered streamers double the revenue share of Twitch, and filled it with gambling content. They had simply built around it. An estimated $1.8 billion was spent on sports betting advertising in the United States in 2023 alone, much of it during live sport, aimed at the same young male audience that the addiction data identifies as most at risk. Multiple class action lawsuits have since been filed in U.S. states accusing Drake, Aiden Ross, and Stake of misleading fans through deceptive promotions. And through all of it, the same companies running those ads have continued to fund responsible gambling initiatives, placing helpline numbers at the bottom of their promotions as evidence they take the problem seriously. Yet not one of them has ever lobbied for more addiction research funding. Despite spending $43 million on political access in a single cycle, the helpline number at the bottom of the screen isn't a solution, it's a shield. If you've turned on a football match in the last few weeks, the machine has already been working on you. The pitch. The 2026 World Cup started on June 11th, the first tournament on U.S. soil since sports betting became legal across the country. This is what the machine looks like when it's fully operational. 65% of Americans can now place a legal bet on it. When the last World Cup was held in 2022, that number was 40%. Global wagers on this tournament are expected to reach $50 billion. A survey carried out before it started found that 29% of Americans plan to place their first ever online bet during the World Cup. First-timers, the audience this machine spent years building toward. In the first week of the tournament, a 23-year-old in Ohio placed his first ever legal bet on a group stage match. He told a reporter it felt like being part of the game. The tournament arrived in America. It had been waiting for it. You're watching it right now. Who actually collects and what it costs everyone else is what we need to talk about next. The receipt. In 2024, FanDuel made $5.78 billion in revenue. DraftKings made $4.67 billion. Between them, they control nearly 3/4 of the American sports betting market, built in 7 years from a standing start in a country where the whole thing was banned until a court said otherwise. Someone paid for all of that, and it wasn't them. To be clear about what this industry does deliver, legal sports betting generates billions in state tax revenue every year, funds education programs in several states, and for the vast majority of people who place a bet, it stays exactly what it looks like: entertainment. The problem is not that the industry exists. The problem is who it was built to depend on. The people on the other side of those numbers are doing less well. Americans are betting more each year and, proportionally, losing more. The economic cost of gambling addiction, measured in healthcare, lost jobs, and criminal justice, runs at an estimated $6 to $7 billion annually. That bill is paid by individuals, by families, and by state governments that now rely on gambling tax to pay their bills. At a gaming conference, a lawyer representing both FanDuel and DraftKings was asked whether deposit limits should be introduced to stop people losing more than they could afford. His response was straightforward. He said he didn't think it was a secret that larger wagerers were their most profitable customers. To illustrate the point, he mentioned a single VIP player who had lost nearly $13 million in a month. That is the receipt. They lobbied for the laws, funded both parties, paid the celebrities, and built the whole thing on the customers least able to walk away. It was never a gamble. For them, it never is. If this is the kind of thing you want to see more of, be sure to subscribe. The system is working, just not for you.